नमो तस्य भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्य भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्य भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight we are going to discuss the Sutta MN 138, Uddesa Vibhaṅga Sutta. This is the exposition of a summary. The Venerable Mahā Kaccāna elaborates upon a brief saying of the Buddha on the training of consciousness and the overcoming of agitation. So, agitation or restlessness or anxiety, this is the fetter that keeps us till we become arhat. So this is a sutta that we are going to read what the Buddha has said regarding how to overcome agitation or why we are agitated and why we are suffering from agitation. So I'm reading from Bhikkhu Bodhi translation. I'm sorry I can't share my screen because I didn't find the Bhikkhu Bodhi translation, but I have Bhikkhu Siddhartha translation. I'm sharing the link, and if you want, you can go through it parallelly. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was leading at Sāvatthi in Jeta's grove, Anāthapindika's park. They, the Blessed One, addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, I shall teach you a summary and an exposition. Listen and attain closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, or students, a student should examine things in such a way that while he is examining them, his consciousness is not distracted and scattered externally, nor stuck internally, and by not clinging, he does not become agitated. If his consciousness is not distracted and scattered externally, nor stuck internally, and if by not clinging he does not become agitated, then for him there is no origination of suffering, of birth, aging, and death in the future. This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, Sublime One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling. So this is like every other sutta that begins with Gita calling his disciples and giving a brief exposition on to them, and then just sleep. If because they didn't ask any other question, he just stands up and he goes to his kuti. So now we'll see what they are doing, students or the bhikkhus who have listened to that short discourse. Then soon after the Blessed One has gone, the bhikkhus considered, now friends, the Blessed One has risen from his seat and gone into his dwelling after giving a summary in brief, without expounding the detailed meaning. Now, who will expound this in detail? Then they considered, Venerable Mahā Kaccāna is praised by the teacher and is esteemed by his wise companions in the holy life. He is capable of expounding the detailed meaning. Suppose we went to him and asked him the meaning of this. And then it is referring to repetition in another sutta. Then this is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Sublime One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling. Now, friends, Venerable Mahā Kaccāna is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his wise companions in the holy life. He is capable of expounding the detailed meaning. Suppose we went to him and asked him the meaning of this. Then the bhikkhus went to the Venerable Mahā Kaccāna and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, they sat down to one side and they told him what had taken place, adding, "Let the Venerable Mahā Kaccāna expound it to us." The Venerable Mahā Kaccāna replied, "Friends, it is as though a man needing hardwood, seeking hardwood, wandering in search of hardwood, thought that hardwood should be sought for among the branches and leaves of a great tree, standing possessed of hardwood, after he had passed over the root and the ground. And so it is with you, venerable sirs, that you think that I should be asked about the meaning of this after you passed the blessed one by when you were face to face with the teacher. For knowing the blessed one knows, seeing he sees, he is vision, he is knowledge, he is the Dhamma, he is the Holy One, he is the Sayer, the Proclaimer, the Elucidator of meaning, the Giver of the deathless, the Lord of the Dhamma, the Tathagata. That was the time when you should have asked the Blessed One the meaning. As he told you, so you should have remembered it. Okay. Now, the those bhikkhus, having heard this brief summary, not understanding what the Buddha has said, thought that suppose we go to the Venerable Mahakaccana and ask him to expound the detailed meaning of the brief exposition that the Buddha has given. And when they go to the Venerable Mahakaccana, he is saying, it is like as if you are going in search of a hardwood, the core of the tree. But then while you are going for that, then you think that it's like it is found in leaves or branches. Even though you are passing by its roots, you don't know its importance. Like it is the hardwood, as if you are passing over it, and then you are not asking enough questions. Then he says, "Okay, now you know you have already passed to the Buddha, but knowing he knows very well, he is the Dhamma, he is the one who has taught the whole path. You should have asked him that rather than coming to me." Then, out of compassion, he starts explaining the brief summary that the Buddha has given. Then listen, friends, and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, friends, the bhikkhus replied. The Venerable Mahakaccana said this. So now the brief statements that the Buddha has given. Now Venerable Mahakaccana is going to expound it. How, friends, is consciousness called distracted and scattered externally? So this question is, how is consciousness called distracted or scattered externally? Here, when a bhikkhu has seen a form with the eye, if his consciousness follows after the sign of form, is tied and shattered by gratification in sign of form, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in sign of form, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has heard a sound with the ear, if his consciousness follows after the sign of sound, is tied and shackled by gratification in sign of sound, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in sign of sound, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has smelled an odor with the nose, if his consciousness follows after the sign of smell, is tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of smell, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of smell, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has tasted a flavor with the tongue, if his consciousness follows after the sign of taste, is tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of taste, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of taste, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has touched a tangible with the body, if his consciousness follows after the sign of form, is tied and shackled by gratification in sign of tangible, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in sign of tangible, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. When he has cognized a mind object with the mind, if his consciousness follows after the sign of the mind object, is tied and shackled by gratification in sign of the mind object, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of the mind object, then his consciousness is called distracted and scattered externally. So here, all of the five senses plus our mind are taking the sixth sense object. And when that consciousness has arisen, depending upon the external form and the internal phase, consciousness when it arises, if it sees a form, if his consciousness follows that sign, okay, now I have smelled the pleasant smell and I want more of it. And my mind will keep following smell. Oh, I have this smell, same kind of smell, smelled it previously, or I have tasted very good food. Then previously, when I used to have the same food at that particular restaurant, it would have been different, or I might have been craving for that. So all this consciousness, when it follows present conscious experience, that is called that following behind that consciousness that has presently arisen is called scattering of the mind. That is externally it is scattered and is distracted by that because it is not experiencing the present consciousness that are arising. Rather, it is involved in the other mental proliferation, or maybe you can say that it is experiencing that is not in the present, but it is all in the different conscious experience. And now, how friends is called, how friend is consciousness called, not distracted and scattered externally. Here we can see when it how it is not distracted. Now you have seen this is suffering, and here it is coming. How do you see it is not suffering? Here, when a bhikkhu has seen a form with the eye, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of form, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of form, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in sign of form, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. So here we can see when this form, consciousness that is arising through external sense base and internal eye base and particular consciousness that is arising, when this consciousness does not follow the sign of that form, smell, taste, or tangible, or sound, or maybe mind object, when this consciousness does not follow along with that and is not tied to that, not tied and going along with it, not shackled by gratification in the sign of form. So this not shackled is not getting tied to it. And by gratification of that sign, when you are experiencing something, you feel so pleasant and then you attach to it and then you want to go along with it. And then it's not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of form. So this fetters is something that they tie to the and the risk of thieves or something. It's like that we get tied to these forms of consciousnesses that we are experiencing. So when it is not fettered, when it is not tied to that particular consciousness that are experiencing, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. When we are not tied to any of the conscious experiences, when we are not fettered, not uh, craving for it or not hating it, when we are experiencing it as it is, then it is called that the consciousness is not distracted and scattered externally. And now we have read it only for the eye as form, and then it goes through ear, sound, smell, tangibles, and mind. When he has heard a sound with the ear, smelled an odor with the nose, tasted a flavor with the tongue, touched a tangible with the body, cognized a mind object with the mind, if his consciousness does not follow after the sign of the mind object, is not tied and shackled by gratification in the sign of mind object, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the sign of mind object, then his consciousness is called not distracted and scattered externally. Here we can see it's, with five senses, you know it very well. But with the mind, it, that is how we train our mind. When we are experiencing some thought or some contact, mind contact that is happening, when the mind consciousness arises, you think even that thinking is also getting scattered externally. And when our mind having that contact experience, when it is not tied to that thought or that contact, that consciousness that is arising, when you are not tied, when you just start it immediately, when you are not identifying with that contact that is happening through mind object, then your mind is not scattered externally. And how, friends, is the mind called stuck internally? So this is the when we feel that we are not progressing anymore, or when you feel like we have stuck in our practice, when you have practiced any other kind of practices, when you have doubt or where you feel that this is not happening, why it is happening, such that. And how, friends, is the mind called stuck internally, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states? A bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rupture and pleasure born of seclusion. If his consciousness follows after the rupture and pleasure born of seclusion, is tied and shackled by gratification in the pleasure of in the rupture and pleasure born of seclusion, then his mind is called stuck internally. So now we have previously we have seen how the mind is not distracted or not scattered externally. Now it is talking about internal aspects of the mind. How is it How is it not stuck internally? Now, when we are experiencing first jhana, factors of the jhana, quite secluded from unwholesome states, when we have first time fixed hindrance, or when we just started with, when we let go of the unwholesome states, the distractions of the mind, then our mind enters the first jhana, which has applied and sustained for in this wish for our own happiness. We have this thought that we have applied and that has sustained. With rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, now having been able to take some time out for ourselves for the meditation to happen, and then having done the 6 hours, having experiencing the first jhana, you feel happy, you feel gratitude, and then there is joy and rapture and pleasure. It feels pleasurable that mind now has. Okay, now it is not involved in any of the worldly things. Now it is internally. But even in that experience of the first jhana, when it grabs on to that rapture and pleasure, when it says, when it ties itself to it, or follows along with that rapture and pleasure, when it goes like that, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, if the consciousness follows after the rupture and pleasure born of seclusion, is tied and shackled, that is attached by gratification in the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, then his mind is called stuck internally. That means he is the person meditating and experiencing first jhana, having his consciousness follow along the rapture and pleasure that is being born, then his mind is stuck internally. Again, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind without applied and sustained thought. With rapture and pleasure born of concentration, if his consciousness follows after the rapture and pleasure born of collectedness, is tied and shackled by the gratification of rapture and pleasure born of collectedness, then his mind is called stuck internally. Similarly, when we are experiencing the second jhana, the factors of the second jhana, that is self-confidence. Now you feel like, okay, now this is working out. I am doing right, doing the 6 hours and experiencing that little balanced state of mind. And singleness of mind without applied and sustained thought. No need of again verbalizing. With rupture and pleasure born of collectedness. Now the mind stays with the object of meditation, loving kindness, for a little longer period. And now you feel rupture and pleasure because of collectedness of the mind. And when you are experiencing this, your mind, when it follows along, when the consciousness, when it gets tied up with that rupture and pleasure born because of collectedness, then when because of this, the mind gets stuck internally. Again, with the fading away as well of rupture, and a bhikkhu abides in equanimity and mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body. He enters upon and abides in the third jhana, on account of which noble ones announce he has pleasant abiding, who has equanimity and is mindful. If his consciousness follows after the equanimity, is tied and shackled by gratification in the rupture and pleasure born of equanimity, then his mind is called stuck internally. Similarly, when we are experiencing third jhana, when our consciousness follows after the factors of the jhana, and when it is distracted through those factors of the jhana, when it is tied to those factors, then it is called stuck internally. Again, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. If his consciousness follows after the neither pain nor pleasure, is tied and shackled by gratification, in the neither pain nor pleasure, is fettered by the fetter of gratification in the neither pain nor pleasure, then his mind is called stuck internally. That is how the mind is called stuck internally. So I heard Bante's talk regarding this sutta, and Bante said when we feel tension, tightness, or very heavy in our mind, or maybe mm, trying too hard kind of thing, then it is said that our mind is stuck internally. So you have to find this balance of collectedness. While we are practicing meditation, our mind is in the object of meditation and not grabbed onto any of it. And also not scattered externally or internally. It should be just collected, resting on the object of meditation, also being aware of what's happening. And then if the hindrance is coming, then discard it and just rest back on the object of meditation. And now we have seen how it is stuck internally. Now we are going to see how it is not stuck internally. And how, friends, is the mind called not stuck internally? Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana. If his consciousness does not follow after the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, is not tied and shackled by the gratification in the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, then his mind is called not stuck internally. Similarly, uh, not similarly because here we have changed it. Here the mind that is getting tied to those uh, seclusion, pleasure and rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. That mind that is following upon this rapture and pleasure, that is getting tied and getting attached to that, we are not getting attached to it. We are just being aware of it and not attaching to it. In the experience of first jhana, then it is called the mind that is not stuck internally. Similarly, with the second jhana, we are not getting attached to rapture and pleasure that is born of collectedness. And in third jhana, we are not getting attached due to the for the rupture and pleasure that is born of equanimity. And then in the fourth jhana, we are not getting stuck or not getting attached or tying up our consciousness that is flowing along. Okay, I'll continue with the reading. There is a repetition, but I'm not doing that repetition here. Again, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in second jhana. If his consciousness does not follow after the rapture and pleasure born of collectedness, then his mind is called not stuck internally. Again, with the fading away as well of rupture and a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the third jhana. If his collectedness, if his consciousness does not follow after the equanimity, then his mind is called not stuck internally. Again, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana. If his consciousness does not follow after the neither pain nor pleasure, is not tied and shackled by the gratification in the neither pain nor pleasure, is not fettered by the fetter of gratification in the neither pain nor pleasure, then his mind is called not stuck internally. That is how the mind is called not stuck internally. So now we have seen how the mind is not distracted and scattered externally, how the mind is distracted and scattered. First we have seen, then how it is not distracted and not scattered externally, and then we have learned how it is uh, internally stuck internally, how it is not stuck internally. Now we are going to see how is there agitation or clinging in our mind. How, friend, is there agitation due to clinging? So clinging is form of mental proliferation where having that mm, having seen a form when you are experiencing, okay, I want more because of that craving. When you see a nice movie, again you want to watch this again. And you make all this preparation for it. Okay, I'm going to watch this on this particular day or particular evening, or maybe all this planning or this thinking that you're making a step forward to make it happen, or simply wanting that to be in that particular way, like, okay, this is what going to happen previously. So even now, again, you want that particular same story to repeat, or your mind have already started all this proliferation. How, friends, is there agitation due to clinging? So this agitation is again restlessness, and this restlessness is caused by clinging. And how is it happening is given here. Here, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. That material form of his changes and becomes otherwise. With the change and becoming otherwise of that material form, his consciousness is preoccupied with the change of material form. Agitated mental states born of preoccupation with the change of material form arise together and remain obsessing his mind. Because his mind is obsessed, he is anxious, distressed, and concerned, and due to clinging, he becomes agitated. So here it is very clear when there is an ordinary person who is untaught or doesn't know the teaching and who has no regard for the nobleman. For that particular person, what happens is he regards material form as self. He takes whatever form that we see as self, that me, mine, self as possessed of material form. Okay, this form is mine. Or material form as in self. So this body, whatever is, this is myself. Or self as in material form. All these are wrong use. Actually, if you want to read this in detail, you can read Clinging book by Wilson Armstrong. Uh, it has given it very detailedly. And then that material form, what that he's taking as self or me, mine, myself, whatever he's taking personally, that material form changes and becomes otherwise. So because of impermanence, that whatever material form he's taking personally, it changes. And whatever it is, it has changed and become something else now. With the change and becoming otherwise of that material form, because of that change in that material form, his consciousness is preoccupied with the change of material form. He wants that to be in that particular way, or he has that seen that form previously in that form, and now because of the external form has changed, now his mind is preoccupied with that past form. And agitated material form becoming otherwise of that material form. His consciousness is preoccupied with change of material form. Agitated mental states born of preoccupation with the change of material form arise together. So because he has already kept that past form in his mind, and now he is seeing something else, some other form that has changed because of impermanence, and because he has took it personally, has taken my form or some form as self, and all these two things happening together, agitated mental states born of preoccupation with the change of material form arise together. These impermanence and taking it personally, self arising together, possessing to have more suffering. Because of this, his mind is obsessed, he is anxious, he is distressed, he is concerned, and due to clinging, he becomes agitated. If we look at this in the detail, the way just we have read, it is showing impermanence, non-self, anicca, dukkha, and anatta. You can see the three characteristics when we are uh, seeing with the eye and the external form, when we take it personally, and then we can see the impermanence, form changes, and that taking it personally starts suffering. And then because of impermanence, when we do the 6 hours, that impersonality, I, we are letting go of the attachment or self to it. Then when we let go of it, we are not suffering. And then he regards feeling as self. He regards perception as self. He regards formations as self. He regards consciousness as self, or self as process of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That consciousness of his changes and becomes otherwise. With the change and becoming otherwise of that consciousness, his consciousness is preoccupied with the change of consciousness. Agitated mental, agitated states of mind, born of preoccupation with the change of consciousness, arise together and remain obsessing his mind, because his mind is obsessed. He is anxious, distressed, and concerned, and due to the clinging, he becomes agitated. This is how there is agitation due to clinging. Again, it's giving in detail about, now we have seen with the eye, the form, same with the feeling, form, the external body, then feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. And this is giving regarding the 5 aggregates and how this clinging to these 5 aggregates make us suffer, how there is agitation or irritation, restlessness, anxiety, depression, how we are causing ourselves suffering by clinging to them when we are obsessed with those forms, when these things are happening, we are taking it personally. Then our mind is agitated due to clinging to that particular, or maybe at a time we may be clinging to form, feeling, perception, and then our consciousness also we are clinging. And then here next it is going to say how there is non-agitation due to non-clinging. Here, a well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their Dharma, who does not regard material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. That material form of his changes and becomes otherwise. With the change and becoming of otherwise of that material form, His consciousness is not preoccupied with the material change of material form. Agitated mental states born of preoccupation with the change of material form does not arise together and remain obsessing his mind. Because his mind is not obsessed, he is not anxious, distressed, and concerned, and due to non-clinging, he does not become agitated. He does not regard feeling as self. He does not regard perceptions as self. He does not regard formations as self. He does not regard consciousness as self, nor self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That consciousness of his changes and becomes otherwise. With the change and becoming otherwise of that consciousness, his consciousness is not preoccupied with change of consciousness. Agitated mental states born of preoccupation with change of consciousness does not arise together and remain obsessing his mind. Because his mind is not obsessed, he is not anxious, distressed, and concerned. And due to non-clinging, he does not become agitated. That is how there is no agitation due to non-clinging. Here we can see how there is non-agitation due to non-clinging. So this clinging is very, like, almost every time in our day, or maybe while meditating, we can see immediately after the craving arises, our mind shifts to the clinging, or maybe mental proliferation. It just starts creating thoughts, and then that thoughts keep growing. Now it will show you big story or complete mind made. And within few minutes, it's completely distracted and it's somewhere in some other world. And all this is because of clinging. And how our mind is clinging, and how we are not suffering because of clinging. What should we do is here. He's saying, when a noble person who is a practitioner of Dhamma, who knows the teaching and who knows the Dhamma, the person does not regard material form as self. Whatever form that we are looking at, or whatever form that is present, we are not taking it as self. One should not take it as self. Or self as in as possessed of material form. Okay, this material form, whatever is it, if I possess this, or that attachment of I should not be there. Is not there for the practitioner of the Dhamma. Or material form as in self. Okay, this material form is mine. That view should not be there. Is not there for the practitioner. Or self as in form. Okay, this form is mine. That view that is there in, in the practitioner, there is not such view. That view of self as a form, or getting attaching an I, me, mine, myself to any of the five aggregates is not there. Then what happens is, whatever that he is seeing, or whatever form is there, feeling is there, perception is there, consciousness is there, all these things, when he is perceiving it, when he is not attaching an I to it, then because of impermanence, even though these formations, these perceptions, feelings, consciousness, form, all these things keep changing. And then when he sees that change, he's not preoccupied with the same amount, same uh, previously whatever has happened. When he's not preoccupied and he's accepting the change, not fighting with the present change, and then when he's not attaching a self, non-self view, and then he's not obsessed, he's not preoccupied with that, and when his mind is not obsessed or not clinging to that change that has happened, then he is not anxious, he's not obsessed, he's not concerned, and he's not stressed, he's not distressed. And this is called non-clinging and non-agitation due to non-clinging. And agitation or restlessness, we say do the 6 hours. But when the mindfulness is rightly established, we know that the mind has to let go of it. You need to do the 6 hours. And then there is no clinging. As soon as you recognize it, when you let go of it, then there is no agitation, no restlessness. Or maybe for a moment, if, even though if there is a restlessness, you don't pay attention to that restlessness. It might be there when you don't pay any attention to it. It will go away. Same with anxiety, water obsession that we said, and then distress that you are experiencing, and then agitation that you are experiencing. Even in your daily life, what happens? Oh, I am agitated, or I am angry, I am restless. So in your mind, you attach this I, saying that, okay, I am agitated, I am angry, I am restless. Instead of that, when you see, okay, there is restlessness in me, or there is restlessness now, what's the best thing that I can do is don't put attention on it, know that it's there, be equanimous toward it, don't fight with it, or just don't pay attention. When you give your attention, it keeps growing, and because of the restlessness or anxiety, obsession, you are not being mindful. Your attention is now on that agitation or restlessness rather than cultivating the whole thing. So when you siksar it, bring your attention back, then you are not agitated, not thinking to any of the five aggregates. Friends, when the Blessed One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling after giving a summary in brief, without expounding the detailed meaning, that is, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu should examine things in such a way that while he is examining them, his consciousness is not distracted and scattered externally, not stuck internally. And by not clinging, he does not become agitated. If his consciousness is not distracted and scattered externally, nor stuck internally, and if by not clinging he does not become agitated, then for him there is no origination of suffering, of birth, aging, and death in the future. I understand the detailed meaning of this summary to be thus. Now, friend, if you wish, go to the Blessed One and ask him about meaning of this, as the Blessed One explains it to you. So you should remember it. Then the bhikkhus, having delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Mahā Kaccāna's words, rose from their seats and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told the Blessed One all that had taken place after he had left, adding, then, Venerable Sir, we went to the Venerable Mahā Kaccāna and asked him about the meaning. The Venerable Mahā Kaccāna expounded the meaning to us with these terms, statements, and phrases. Mahā Kaccāna is wise because Mahā Kaccāna has great wisdom. If you had asked me the meaning of this, I would have explained it to you in the same way that Mahā Kaccāna has explained it. Such is its meaning, and so you should remember it. This is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. And here now we can see every time in our daily life, we are recognizing it with a smile, to putting a little smile. Okay, now the mind is stuck externally. Okay, now the mind is stuck internally. Now I am being whatever joy that is arising, I'm attaching to it. And then this clinging, this agitation is because of clinging. And then you siksar it, smile, and come back. And you cultivate the wholesome. And being aware of the object of meditation and being collected around the object of meditation. It's very important. And that's how we cultivate our mind wholesome and keep our practice going. Anybody has any question? And do you have? Yes.
Sindhu, it's a brilliant Dhamma talk. Now I understand how to end the suffering. It incorporates the whole of the Dhamma. 6 R's, dependent origination, 4 noble truths, 3 marks of existence, 6 sets of 6, impermanence, how the clinging works, and how the insight works, and how the consciousness works. My goodness, it is very definitely the path to nirvana and awakening. Thank you very, very much for choosing this sutta. I'm very, very impressed. It's a great help. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mangalam. Actually, this sutta, as you said, covers almost all of the teaching. It has, like you said, dependent origination, 4 noble truths, 5 aggregates, and then 3 characteristics of existence. And then, most importantly, clinging in the right effort is also covered. Paul, do you have any insights or do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Very good talk. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Gopinath
No
sir?
questions.
Okay. Gopinath sir, hello. I know you have joined late, but that's fine. Do you have anything to add? Do you have any questions or just share about your practice?
Hello.
Yes.
Practice is going well. It's okay. I listen to your speech. Thank you so much.
If there are no questions, may we share the merits? May suffering once, may suffering free, and fear stuff, fearless free. May the grieving shed all free, and may all beings find free. May all beings share this merit that we have just acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings, inhabitants, space and earth, Deva, Inaga, mighty power, save this merit of love. May belong to the God is Sa, Sa, Sa. May you all be peaceful and happy, and all be smiling. Thank you for joining.